So warm welcome back to those joining us from home, and warm welcome to all of you as well. So my name is Amalayodhin, and I'll be continuing on the series that we've been on, the symbols of Tantric Buddhism, that we've been doing for about 8 weeks now. And so this evening what we're going to be talking about is offerings and self-sacrifice. So offerings and self-sacrifice. And actually, as it happens, so often the universe does this for you. It sort of cues you up on these particular talks. You need a sort of way into them. And so often, if you pay careful attention, the universe will sort of offer it to the universe. Hardly new agey sort of way of putting it, but the universe, it's the only way I have of putting it, will offer it up to you if you pay careful attention. And I had one such instance very recently. So I'm just back from, I did a week's walk along the West Highland Way, and that explains the sort of healthy weathered look. Don't worry, it'll be sickly again in 48 hours. But it's this incredible walk. I don't know if anybody here else has done it, but it's this amazing walk. Starts in a town called Milgahy, just outside Glasgow, and runs for about 100 miles up along Loch Lomond and up into the West Highlands and the Munros, past Glen Nevis and Ben Lomond as well. Just an amazing, really incredible. If anybody ever gets a week off and fancies a walk, it's a really amazing stretch of 100 miles. But anyway, the first 2 or 3 days I wasn't exactly feeling inspired at the start of this walk. I had a 15 kilo pack, and the first day the second day I'd set myself a sort of 20-mile stretch on this. So I arrived absolutely exhausted at about 6 or 7 in camp, and the next day I was feeling kind of sore and wearisome, shall we say. Walking along the edge of Loch Lomond, not particularly appreciating the phenomenal natural beauty that I'd put myself there to appreciate, mostly just sort of complaining and grumbling at myself and other walkers for whatever reason I could find. The midges, actually, they told me the midges weren't there in late May. The midges were there in late May. They were certainly there. That particular morning I was walking along the loch, I happened to lean forward and expose just a little strip just along my back of skin, and I've still got what looks like a sort of dot-to-dot bites all the way. That's like a week later. Anyway, you didn't come here to hear about me. So I was feeling a little bit sorry for myself on this particular day, and I came across this mural, this plaque along the walk, and the mural read, not exactly word for word, but in memory of Bill Lomond, who made the ultimate sacrifice in giving a life for a friend. And I was very, very moved by it, actually, just really kind of struck by it initially. It was sort of, the ultimate sacrifice, isn't it? In the Bible it says there is no love like giving your life for a friend. There is no other love like giving your life for a friend. So it's seen as the ultimate expression of love, isn't it, to give your life for a friend. So this guy, Bill Lomond, drowned in the process of saving. He went out with a few colleagues. He was a university professor from Glasgow, and he went out with a few colleagues that day, and they got swept up. There was adverse weather conditions, and I think somebody stepped into a stream, misjudged the depth, and got swept into it, and he went in to help save some of his colleagues, and some students that were at the university with him were survived, but he tragically drowned, and a father of 2, and an incredible sacrifice. What a sacrifice to make. Could you know any other love like that, to give your life for friends like that as well? Absolutely amazing. So I was immediately sort of moved, incredibly moved by the whole thing, sort of straight away sort of transcended my small, narrow, grumpy kind of mind, and was given this incredibly beautiful act which of course just immediately just sort of opened your mind up to, you know, something much higher and something much more transcendent in a way, something much more divine. And of course it had seemed that people who had come along the path as well had also had that same feeling, because just in front of the plaque was this amazing sort of almost like a sort of, how to describe it, it's like this tower of sticks that had been sort of gathered and kind of put around as an offering to this particular mural, as an offering, I suppose, to Ben Lomond and Bill Lomond, sorry. And just all along the plaque as well, people had found sort of little stones and put them just around and in front and sort of gathering up all around it. And so you had this amazing sort of series of offerings from people that had just been passed by and obviously struck by the nature. I had to go and find out about the nature of what happened afterwards, so you wouldn't know that by the mural, but it was clear that he had given his life for colleagues, and then this, you know, everybody being sort of moved to kind of offer something. And as I went to sort of look for something to kind of offer, I noticed that the whole area had just been completely sort of cleared of stones and pebbles. You actually had to go quite far to find a sort of stone or pebble to kind of add your mark, but it was so sort of demanded of you. It was funny, there was something about it. Maybe it was all sorts of tired travellers that had come along and been sort of moved by it on that day, but it was sort of demanded by you. So it was incredibly moving. I found not only it sort of moving this act that sort of motivated people to give offerings up in that way, but also people's kind of response to it as well, that here was this, you know, that something still very significant, that people felt it very significant, that here we were. Sometimes we paint it as a very nihilistic universe, but here human beings still move, still motivated to recognise and revere and offer up to acts of bravery, courage, beauty, love, all of those things. So I was really sort of transported by it away, I'd say, by the sacrifice and the recognition of the sacrifice as well in it. So you had offerings, and you had self-sacrifice in this particular talk. So this evening I'm going to, in this particular scene, so this evening I'm going to talk a little bit more about both. So so I think people are generally, as the story would suggest, people are very moved by self-sacrifice, and I think that occurs across cultures as well and across time. You know, I think there's so many myths actually of self-sacrifice around the world, if you look at it, including in Buddhism as well. I'll say some more, but people are sort of generally moved, and there's usually a kind of place for the valorization of people who self-sacrifice. Now sometimes that can be twisted as well, and as so often with ideals, those ideals sometimes get twisted. So I always remember I lived in Gaza for some time many years ago. Gaza is part of the occupied Palestinian territories, and is obviously right at the heart of a very deep conflict zone, the conflict between Palestinians and the Israelis. And if you go around Gaza, in the old town of Gaza in particular, there are these murals, a bit like we'd have for sort of shopping, like advertisements, like you'd see on a motorway or something like that if you were to drive past. But in these particular murals, there are images of young men who have blown themselves up, maybe targeting military targets, Israeli military targets, maybe targeting innocent civilians as well. Actually, that's could have been either. You wouldn't know. But there's these huge and massive sort of billboards of young men who have committed suicide in the process of blowing up other human beings in this particular instance. And very, very eerie, you know, they oftentimes with a Kalashnikov in one hand, a Quran in the other, and strapped up with the Semtex that they'll use to blow themselves up. So very sort of eerie kind of images, very sort of otherworldly and quite sort of off-putting in a way. You know, these young men often sort of smiling, although you could almost see the doubt creep in sometimes as well, just on their faces, and they were only ever sort of 24 hours or so away from blowing themselves up, and probably another of other human beings as well in the process. So self-sacrifice, like any ideal, can often be sort of picked up from the wrong end. And actually, when any ideal gets picked up from the wrong end, it actually becomes really quite poisonous. There's something about ideals that have to be very, very carefully handled. That if they're picked up in the wrong way, they become much worse than the lack of the ideal, but something really, really quite poisonous. So we do have to be careful with ideals, don't we? But they do sort of exist now. Looking at other sort of areas as well, say for example, because self-sacrifice plays such a positive part in Islam as well. Sometimes in this particular movement we look at the duties of brotherhood in Islam by a Muslim scholar called Al-Ghazali. And consistently, over and over and over again in that text, The Duties of Brotherhood in Islam, Al-Ghazali talks about the need for self-sacrifice, particularly in friendship. That friendship is based in this Muslim ideal, is this Islamic ideal on self-sacrifice, on putting yourself out for your friend, on giving yourself for your friend in sort of self-sacrifice for your friend. And I noticed that with friends that I had actually in Gaza and Palestine more broadly. I lived in the West Bank for a while as well, that they loved to put themselves out for you. There was nothing more that they enjoyed than to sort of take on an inconvenience if they could do it for you. It was like, and you'd have to sort of go through the dance of saying, oh no, don't do it. They say, yes, I will do it. They'd love it. They could light up with the opportunity of kind of putting themselves out. I think about it, I think, God, when I put myself out, I often do it so sort of begrudgingly, that's what often be so way of doing it, and really sort of in a kind of self-martyred kind of way. But they sort of light up, my friends, my Palestinian friends, would light up this opportunity of really kind of put the more awkward and the more putting themselves out, the more they sort of enjoyed it. So right at the heart of kind of the duties of friendship, I think that's right. Those writings of Al-Ghazali and more broadly, I think other Islamic writers have sort of filtered through the Islamic culture and found themselves in that way as well. And of course, the other one that we have is sort of the other image of sacrifice that we have that's right at the heart of our culture is Christ's sacrifice on the cross, isn't it? And so, it's strange, isn't it? Sometimes you can miss a symbol if you're sort of around it all the time, because in a certain sense, even though God is dead, as Nietzsche told us, the sort of fumes of Christianity, we still breathe them in every day, don't we? And they're sort of still very much in the culture with us. And of course, the central sort of symbol of Christianity is Christ dying on the cross, Christ sort of dying for our sins on the cross. So that's how the Christian tradition puts it. You can miss it, can't you? Because you sort of just see it all the time. Very unusual symbol when you take a few steps back from. I grew up in a Christian culture and a Catholic culture, and in many ways have become grateful for that as well. But when you take a few steps back from it and you go, that's a very unusual symbol to have as you're sort of, somebody being tortured to death. But that is the symbol, and that sort of has been passed down to us culturally as well, of somebody sort of dying for our sins. So self-sacrifice in that sort of sense is right at the heart of our culture in that particular way. It's interesting, that can sort of I might come back to that, how that sometimes I think that particular vision of self-sacrifice gets a little bit twisted as well, and sometimes used and not in the best ways. But Buddhism also celebrates self-sacrifice as well, actually, and there are sort of myths in the Buddhist tradition of giving yourself up, of completely sort of offering yourself up to a higher ideal, on the basis of love, on the basis of wisdom, completely offering yourself up for something that you think is higher than yourself, more beautiful than yourself, more important than yourself. So there's very, very strong tradition in Buddhism as well, and it goes right back actually to the Jataka tales of the Buddha. So the Buddha had these old life stories, previous life stories, that some of them canonical, some of them sort of folkloric, that have been taken on, and the Buddha has been put into various sort of, I suppose, common folklore tales that were around India at the time. And often in those Jataka tales, the Buddha he's a bird, or he's a monkey, or he's another human being, and he goes through all these various sort of lives, and they're a bit like Aesop's fables or something like that. That would be how we sort of recognize them here. You know, they kind of there's lots of different sort of kind of just so stories, giving various different life examples of the Buddha, and often actually the Buddha is sacrificing himself for you know, something that he views to be more important. So in various kind of old previous life stories, one life story, say for example, he gives himself up to a hungry tigress because her cubs haven't eaten in many, many weeks. So he gives himself up, and he allows this hungry tigress and the cubs to feast on his body. Quite a striking image, isn't it? But these sort of stories of self-sacrifice did go right back to the Jataka tales as well, and so they are right there at the heart of the Buddhist tradition as well. I think one of the main sort of ways that tradition has come down, that's sort of most culturally recognisable, actually, and I remember it from quite a young man, was people will have seen images of the burning monk. Now the burning monk was a man called Thich Quan Duc, and I remember first coming across the image, actually, for those of us anybody that's into heavy metal. Rage Against the Machine had an album cover. Rage Against the Machine had an eponymous album called Rage Against the Machine, and this particular album cover was of this monk, Thich Quan Duc, who had set himself alight in protest of the South Vietnamese government's oppression of the local Buddhist population. They were a Catholic government. There was a French colonial government basically, and they started to clamp down on a lot of the monasteries and a lot of the local Buddhist population in South Vietnam. South Vietnam was a colony of the French at the time. Some people often think, and I thought at the time actually, that it was related to the Vietnam War, but it wasn't. It was actually much before the Vietnam War, as part of the struggle between the local Buddhist community and quite an oppressive Catholic sort of French propped up South Vietnamese colonial government. And I remember even at the time as a young man being so sort of struck by the image, you know, this incredible image of serenity. Actually, you can even see it. Many of you will know the image. So Quan Duc set himself alight, but just sat there completely serenely for about 10 minutes as he slowly sort of died. And you even looking at the face, it just looks at this completely serene face. David Mitchell, actually, who knows many of the people and has interviewed the people who were around Quan Duc at the time, said he was completely serene in the days running up to his death. He only knew with about sort of 12 or 24 hours, because it was a very, very drastic situation in South Vietnam, where the government had actually basically embargoed a group of people and stopped a group of local Buddhists and stopped food and water coming in. So there was some 400 or 500 Buddhists in this local town, and he said that he would make an offering of himself to the Buddha if food and water weren't let into these Buddhists to relieve the siege on them in particular. So he set himself alight as he said he would, but David Mitchell, in talking to some of the people who were his friends and around him, the abbot in his monastery at the time, the Buddhist monastery that he was part of at the time, said he was no more than 10 meters away from him as he set himself alight. And one of the things that struck him the most about it, what David Mitchell said that this abbot said to him was that he did not flinch the whole entire time, completely sort of serene. What an incredible sort of image, in a way, isn't it? To be so sort of, can you imagine the meditation, I get a pain in my knee and I can't stop moving around. Incredible, amazing, the level of depth of equanimity that has to be cultivated to do that. And I think, but not also the level of equanimity, but also the level of love that has to be cultivated to do that sort of thing. And I think I was talking to David Mitchell just earlier, actually, and I said I'd say a little bit about Quan Duc because it's so close to the sort of topic this evening. And he said one of the very, very important things to say is that it wasn't for Quan Duc an act of suicide. It wasn't that he was living in despair. It wasn't that he wanted to end his life. Actually, what it was from him was a total act of giving, a total act of love. Not against any sort of enemy, but for the people that he was saving. The siege actually was lifted on that local town of Buddhists, and he did actually help to save some 400 or 500 lives in that particular act. It galvanized the world, that image actually, and put a lot of pressure on the South Vietnamese government, and they then had to ease up on their repression of the Buddhist community. But he was very, very insistent that I say that actually that Quan Duc's motivation, David Mitchell has done a film about it actually as well, if you'd like to find out more, was one of love, was one of wisdom. It was one of motivation to benefit other living beings, not against the South Vietnamese government, not in sort of antagony to them, but with them in mind as well, with them in keeping them in mind, an active love of them as well. Which is very, very different, isn't it? I mean, one of the things that was often talked about with Palestinians, say for example, suicide bombers, is that they were often chosen on the basis that they were looking for a way out already, that they were suicidal in their life already, that they had sort of been broken by their life circumstances or the conflict or whatever it might be, or maybe they had family members that they had lost as well. Very, very brutal, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and so they were sort of prime targets in a certain sense to be used in this particular way. And of course, their act of suicide was as much a motivation of sort of despair, of despondency, and of course hatred as well, and revenge, as anything else. And this isn't me making judgment on those young men actually, because it was a very, very complicated situation in which those conditions arose for them to do that. I don't think judgment helps in this particular instance. But Quan Duc's offering, Quan Duc's sacrifice was completely different from that. It was one that was totally motivated by love and wisdom. And of course you would have had to have really seen through, to give yourself in that particular way, you would have actually really had, I would imagine you would have had to really have seen through the whole delusion of a separate and distinct self in which you were sacrificing. Presumably for Quan Duc, he had started to even get a sense of the Buddha's enlightened vision of the interconnectedness of all living beings, that this sort of tight, defended self that we have, that we are so sort of kind of, defended about and kind of protective of, is not there in reality. It's not something that actually exists in reality. And so to offer yourself like that presumably involves seeing through that delusion of a fixed, separate and defended self as well, and being willing to sort of act on that. So a really kind of incredible example encapsulating the ideal of self-sacrifice, I think, was Quan Duc's. So in Buddhism, self-sacrifice always comes from a commitment to an ideal. And always, if it's true self-sacrifice, it always comes from the commitment to an ideal. And a sort of very, very positive place of love and wisdom. And of course, that's not how we always kind of, again, we can pick up ideals in the wrong sort of way, and sacrifice we can do that in the wrong way as well, can't we? So often, interestingly, we sort of sacrifice the wrong things, don't we? It's interesting, the use of the word sacrifice. People say, I sacrificed a lot for that. I sacrificed a lot for my career, or I sacrificed a lot for my physique, or I sacrificed a lot for my something else, and we use it interchangeably with, somebody like Bill Lomond who gave his life for something, really, really incredible. We use this term sacrifice in this completely interchangeable sort of way. And guess what? The universe might not particularly like your sacrifice, might not like what it sort of has for you, what you've sacrificed up in any particular way. And it's interesting if you look at the old story of Cain and Abel. Cain makes his sacrifices to God, but God's he's not impressed. He's like, oh, I don't really. But Abel makes his brother makes his sacrifices to God, and God is impressed, and he rewards them. Now, if you understand that story sort of a bit more poetically, a bit more metaphorically, I think what it probably says is that not all our sacrifices are the same. They're not all sort of recognised by the universe in the same sort of way. Sometimes we sacrifice the wrong thing. If we sacrifice, say, for example, our health for our career's sake, well, the universe isn't going to respond to that particularly positively. It's not going to sort of reward you. Other people are not going to reward you for that. Reality is not going to sort of flailing for terms here, but reality is not going to reward you for that. It's not going to be seen on particularly well. If you sacrificed your health for the sake of your career, you've sacrificed something actually really quite meaningful and beneficial to you and potentially to others for the sake of nothing, really. For the sake of something that will sort of go up in dust probably before your eyes. Similarly, if you sacrifice your marriage or your family life or your friendship for, you name it, you sacrifice your friends for a romantic interest. That sometimes happens as well, isn't it? One of your friends disappears off the face of the planet, you never see them again, and they sacrifice all their friendships for the sake of a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a partner or whatever it might be. But again, the universe might not sort of particularly admire your sacrifice. So again, it's interesting, it's sort of the Cain and the Abel story. Sometimes our sacrifices aren't sort of particularly positive ones, or made in the right way, or the right things aren't sacrificed, and it's not for the right particular reason. Or you can make the other way that we sometimes confuse this particular ideal, and again I do think it sort of comes back to Christ's sacrifice for us, atoning for our sins on the cross, as the Christian tradition would put it. But you can make a martyr of yourself as well, can't you? That's a particular sacrifice that some of us sort of slip into very easily. And the martyr loves nothing more than to kind of really kind of I don't know, what is it? It's sort of completely kind of do anything to kind of atone for the sins of others around them, in the sense of, what's it? A classic sort of stereotype of the Irish mammy, I'll give one that's close to home. A classic stereotype of the Irish mammy is that she loves nothing more than to sort of martyr herself for her sons and daughters, and so they kind of run her ragged, and they don't appreciate her, and she does all this work and it's never appreciated, and all of these things, and of course it's not sort of done on the basis of a proper kind of ideal, is it? It's often kind of, if you notice with martyrs, they sometimes just love when people don't do something, so that they can sort of come in and do it for them, and kind of really sacrifice themselves for them, and not in a kind of good-spirited kind of way, but in a very sort of begrudging sort of way, which they're going to let you know about later. And the more they sort of suffer, the more they kind of become sanctified in their martyrdom, don't they? They kind of, they really kind of enjoy their own sort of suffering, which they sort of dwell in for the sake of others. So that sometimes we can do that, can't we? Where it's like we kind of really kind of love having to kind of step in for other people's faults, so that we can feel kind of a bit more kind of saintly on the basis of it, or something like that. But interestingly, I've noticed, you know, I know people that fall into this particular archetype. It never works out for them either. It's never appreciated as much as they'd want it to be. And people sort of know what's happening, that it's often kind of based out of guilt, or there's a sort of desire to kind of to really let people know about it or something like that. So it often just doesn't work. So again, it's the sort of ideal of sacrifice gone slightly wrong. So with all ideal sacrifice, self-sacrifice can be sort of a bit sort of misidentified, I think, as well. So we're just coming along now to the sort of the next part of the story, which is the whole area of offering. And I wasn't just moved by Bill Lohman's sacrifice for his friends and giving up his life for his friend, but I was also really, really moved by the offerings that were just sort of laid out in front of the of this particular memorial. And you know, it was interesting. Penny Manis talked a bit about retreat earlier during the break. I'm sure many of you will have been on retreat, and so much of part of the job when you're a retreat leader is to sort of explain and get people to take part in ritual offerings. You sort of make this horrible sort of, I'm really sorry, but we're going to do a puja talk. People might have heard this talk, where it's like, you know, I'm really sorry, we're going to do a puja. Reading between the lines, it's terribly sorry. I know it's weird. I know it's strange. We're going to do a puja. You know, obviously we don't say this, but that's the whole kind of atmosphere of the talk. Like, is I'm desperately sorry, but Buddhists do ritual. You know. And you sort of have to explain it around your way. Now, if you gave that same talk to Tibetan Buddhists or Vietnamese Buddhists or Thai Buddhists, they'd think it was a ridiculous talk. They'd say, well, we just do ritual because we have an ideal and we want to sort of offer it, we want to revere it in a certain way. That's probably the talk that we should give. But anyway, you sort of have to massage people and let them know it's okay, you know, it's not a God, don't worry, it's not God, we don't think it's God. You know, it's not the golden calf, it's an ideal, it's a symbol, you know, it's in you, it's in it, you know, so you have to this sort of 20 minutes, half an hour, and some people react to it, and then you need to kind of smooth that over the next time. At the end of the retreat, people are like, why do we have to do ritual? It's really stupid. And you go, I know it's strange and everything else. Anyway. So much of our job on retreat is to sort of is to get people to try offerings and to try ritual. But it's the most natural thing in the world. You know, here we are at this plaque. That's exactly what people had done. They'd all given offerings. They'd all wanted to revere it, this particular act of self-sacrifice, this particular act of love. I have no doubt that many of those people, if you brought them on retreat, they'd be like, God, what's this about? That's really weird, that's really strange. But there they were, all maybe in spite of themselves at times, searching around for a pebble or a stick to place at this particular memorial. Sometimes, you know, probably having to go 5-10 meters down the way, really kind of find something, put their bag down, have a proper look. Maybe it's raining sometimes, but they're not leaving there without making an offering. The most normal and natural thing in the world for human beings to recognize and revere and look up to that which is higher than them, or that which is beautiful. So I was very, very sort of moved by the kind of the spontaneity, I think, of the offerings. And you know, I think for them what they would have sort of been experiencing was the relief, in a sense, of being able to look up to something. The Buddha saw this on the dawn of his enlightenment. When he became enlightened, he thought, what will I look up to now? You know, there was no false pride about the Buddha. He said, I am now, you know, the highest. I am the pinnacle of what a human being can be. I have broken through to enlightenment. There's nobody for me to look up to. What or who do I look up to now? And he said, because to not have something to look up to is painful. And we experience that pain, don't we? If we don't have something to look up to, if we don't have something to revere, somebody or some act to look up to or revere, we find that painful. And of course, as soon as we have an opportunity to look up or revere, it's a relief, isn't it? That's what I sort of experienced there. I think you could see people's relief at the opportunity to make offerings to an act of self-sacrifice, an act of love. But we need that in our lives, I think, on a daily, a weekly, a monthly, a yearly basis, where we have something that we can look up to and just make offerings to, as much as we possibly can. So the Buddha said that, he said that, look, to not have something to look up to is deeply painful. Now what the Buddha said was that, okay, what he would look up to was the Dharma, or reality. Now for the Buddha, of course, that's the only thing left for him to look up to. But of course for us, I mean, for me, speaking personally, I have just a huge amount of people that I can look up to. There's so many people between me and the ideal of enlightenment. Such a long distance between me and the ideal of enlightenment that, I have so many people that I can look to. I'm very, very lucky to have so many people that I can look up to here at the London Buddhist Centre, and that I think, and I have an ideal as well in the path that I'm able to look up to. That's been set out before me by others as well, and for me that's been such a huge relief in my life, the ability just to be able to look up. And we need to do that. Not only do we need to do that in sort of feeling, but just like those people who came across the memorial on Loch Lomond that day, we need to do it in acts of body and speech as well. So not just in mind. It's not good enough just to be able to sort of admire something in our minds, privately in our minds, to really sort of give full fruition to that sense of looking up to something. We need to involve our body and our speech in that as well, don't we? And that's what we do in a Buddhist ritual. We involve both acts of worship and words of worship as well in what we're doing. Of course, that's what people did as well in placing those stones or those sticks there. We understand, don't we, that it's not enough to have sort of private feelings of affection. That's where sort of marriages go wrong, don't they? You get these sort of private feelings of affection that are never acted upon. They're never sort of, the boxes of chocolates become more scarce down through the years. The flowers become more sort of scarce down through the years. The cards become more scarce, and people think, oh, well, they know that I love them, don't they? And this doesn't have to be just romantic relationships. It can be friendships, it can be parents, brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, whatever it might be. So often, and I'm guilty of this myself, so often our private feelings of affections don't go into acts of body and acts of speech, and of course so they stay locked up privately. And for a sort of feeling of affection to stay locked up privately probably means it will wither quite soon, actually. Those things need to be acted upon and communicated with acts of body and acts of speech as well. So those three words, I love you, very, very important, aren't they? And also acting on that as well in terms of those small sort of daily offerings that we make, which are so important to maintaining our friendships, maintaining our affections and our connections with other people as well. But they're closely connected, aren't they? They're sort of offering and self-sacrifice, very, very closely connected. And when you offer something, I do think you should actually be making a small little act of self-sacrifice. And now here at the London Buddhist Centre, to name a small example, we give people incense to offer up and candles to offer up. Traditionally, actually, in the East, you'd bring your own incense and you'd offer that up. It had to be a little bit of self-sacrifice, actually. You were offering it up to the Buddha, this particular incense, but it had to cost you a little something. So I think, many of you, say, for example, would have come here this evening and you would have made a dana offering in the bowl at the front, or you give a monthly offering through a direct debit or something like that to the centre. And of course, in a sense, that's an offering, isn't it? It's just because we have this particular relationship with money where we think it's dirty, horrible stuff, actually, but that's not a particularly Buddhist relationship. I don't think it's more sort of Christian in that sense. But that's an offering. When you put money in the dana bowl, that's an offering. If again in the East you'd go up and you'd bow and you put the money to your head and you put it in the dana bowl in front of the shrine, and it was very, very clear actually that the dana offering, the financial offering, was an offering. It was part of a sort of religious ceremony. And we couldn't probably do that here. It would look strange to our eyes and minds. But that's what they do in the East, and so it is an offering actually. And maybe some ways we need to have some sort of ritualistic way of you dropping your fiver or your tenner into the dana bowl, maybe 3 cows or something like that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But I'll finish up actually just with saying one final thing, and I think what the story of Bill Loman's I think demonstrate is the greatest offering that you can make for any ideal or to any other human being is to offer up your life. Now, of course, that can mean the ultimate sacrifice in giving your life in that particular way, and that's held up very, very highly, isn't it? And of course, it's the ultimate sacrifice that you can make. But I think one of the ideals in joining an order, for example, or the order, the Triratna Buddhist order, one of the ideals that was communicated to me in doing that is that actually you were then offering up your life. In joining the Triratna Buddhist order, ideally you are you're offering up your life. Your life when you join the Triratna Buddhist order is no longer your own. It doesn't belong to you in that sort of individualistic, tight way that we generally own our lives, don't we? So that means that, say, for example, in the decisions that I make with my life are done in coordination with my friends, they're done in coordination with my spiritual mentors, they're done with ideally, and I don't always live up to this ideal, it's a very, very hard ideal to live up to, but ideally the decisions of what I do with my life on a daily, weekly, lifetime basis are done with where will I serve most purpose in communicating the teachings of the Buddha. That's ideally what my life would be, that it doesn't belong to me in any particular sense anymore, not in that sort of way. It's not there for me to sort of do with as I wish anymore. And a bit like, and I don't think this is completely too far from what a lot of people would have with children, for example. Your life stops becoming your own when you have kids for a little while, doesn't it? It also belongs to somebody else. So one of the ways of sort of offering up your life is just taking responsibility, which means that you won't be able to do with your life exactly as you wish from sort of moment to moment. You have responsibilities to other people that you need to fulfill. So, another thing if that is in the order is that it said you don't really have a private life anymore. So there's no aspect of your life that's sort of off limits from the inquiries of your friends. So an order member cannot say to another order members, for example, that's none of your business. That is not allowed. Those few words are not allowed because actually within the order, because you offer up your life, because your life is no longer your own in that particular way, your life is then the business of your brothers and sisters in the order as well, because you share your life with them, and it's then a common project towards a common goal, a collective goal. So for me, the ideal of joining the Triratna Buddhist order is that you make an offering of your life. Now, partly for me, that has been actually, a high ideal, but one that I've been able to get on board with, because in a certain particular sense, I had my life given to me again through the order. I was desperately sort of lost and confused and alienated before I came across the movement, and in a certain way the order and Bhante Sangharakshita gave me my life back again. So it has made sense for me to want to sort of offer it up again. If I've sort of got something that I've received very, very important or vital to me, it has made sense for me to sort of want to give it back, which may not be the case with all of us. So I don't think it's one that you can sort of impose on people. That sort of ideal. It's one that you sort of take up as an individual yourself, and it's one actually that's lived from sort of moment to moment. It's not a one and done thing. but it's one that you can fail or achieve on a moment-to-moment basis, depending on what you're doing. So that's it. I won't say any more, but it would be amiss to do a talk on offerings and self-sacrifice and not have an opportunity to make offerings to the Buddha. So why don't we do that now? So what we'll do is we'll sit very briefly, and we can just keep that in mind, that actually what we're doing is offering up something to an ideal, and that ideal has been of value to us, and we want to offer something up to it as well. So we'll sit for a moment, and do come up in sort of 3s and 4s, and you might just have to crowd around, and there's incense there, but you don't have to. Not everybody has to give incense. You can just bow and make an offering of a vow. So when Pranyamanis is ready, we'll listen to the Shakyamuni mantra.
Yeah.